Uh, we have a special strategic defense pact already with Saudi Arabia, and which was earlier on a formalization of our old defense ties by way of common training, defense production, plus some threat assessment. The response, as you mentioned, did not come about in the manner that you described, was perhaps because of a lot of options still available with Saudi Arabia, and uh, there was no hurry in pushing this response, because this response is then it has its own implications. Iran was also a brotherly Muslim country, and the best option was to co-opt them and to dissuade them. And since Pakistan was already mediating with them, Pakistan had some channels open, and it impressed upon Iran the need to desist from attacks on Saudi soil, and which they did later on. And I think that was also a kind of a defense support that Pakistan rendered. But this is a different defense pact, which includes Turkey. In essence, this remains the same strategic pact as Pakistan had with Saudi Arabia. Now, Turkey has been added in the envelope. Turkey brings to the table its very strong defense industrial base, and it has a desire to play a leadership role in the Middle East, especially once Israel and Iran are embroiled in a conflict. So, and it is also mindful of the fact that a good relationship with Saudi Arabia always benefits Turkey. Because Turkey would always like its southern flank to be covered in case of any security threat to it itself. So that it has achieved, and Saudi Arabia obviously brings its economic muscle, international clout, and a very dominant position in the Gulf. Pakistan has a battle-tested military, very strong training, and you know, uh, active operational component, which has the expeditionary warfare capacity, both in all three domains: naval, air, as well as land components. So this is a good symbiosis of three capabilities that binds three important Islamic countries together in a defense shield, which though has a collective proviso that attack on one would be considered attack on all, but it is different from the Article 5 commitment of NATO, because that commitment was a bit uh, aggressive, and it had the provisions of launching offensive operations. In this case, it is purely defensive, that anything that materializes by way of offensive threat would be responded defensively. And there are various options, starting from obviously military cooperation, intelligence sharing, and provision of armaments, training, and the response options, because we might come subsequently to this question. So I should leave it at that, because there's so many things that need to be clarified at operational level. I think the real driving force was the environment that prevailed. It was a very uh, fraught environment in which all three countries were impacted in one way or the other. Pakistan, because it was a neighboring country of Iran, and any destabilization in Iran would have impacted it. So Pakistan was very active in mediation, and that earned the Iranian trust also. Saudi Arabia directly involved because of its energy supplies, because of the few attacks on its soil. Turkey, obviously, being in the Middle East, was also impacted. And Middle East dynamics were changing. Security dynamics were not no longer the same as prevailed before the war. The American security umbrella was not as foolproof and strong as heretofore, because of several reasons. And one of those reasons was the approach of the current administration, wherein the new national security strategy of United States also prefers a burden sharing by the allies. It is already pushing its NATO allies to invest more in their own defenses. So I think America also was leaning towards making these countries self-reliant. And another very important and the urgent reason was because once this security threat actually materialized and there were attacks on Gulf and the littoral countries of Persian Gulf, what happened was that first time in the Middle East history, the countries felt really threatened because earlier on, Iran had never attacked UAE, Iran had never attacked Qatar, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. So they felt threatened. And then they also experienced that the weight of American defensive effort that was pivoted towards Israel because there was a shortage of interceptors, and we knew that when the Patriot and the THAAD missile batteries in defensive mode, those depleted their munitions. The preference was given to Israel, and these countries felt completely denuded of any defense. So there was a logical thinking on their part that since we are investing so much in our economy, why not invest in our own defense? And what more defensive credibility than roping in two countries that have both military muscle as well as a credible defense industrial base, Pakistan and Turkey. So I think Saudi Arabia had that in mind, that has given them an additional option. They have diversified their security. And Pakistan, obviously, it has a strategic capability also, though that is not part of this strategic defense agreement between Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. But that capability invests Pakistan with a certain respectability and gravitas, and everybody is mindful of that. So those things matter from the optics and the signaling point of view as well. Yes, it's a very relevant question because the threat menu has to be commonly shared. The whole threat matrix has to be threadbare discussed, analyzed, prioritized, and then the response options figured out. Now, they all three countries have a different menu of threats, but the common threat, of course, is the threat to the energy security of Gulf. Any instability there by way of a conflict that will impact the energy flows impacts all these three countries. So this is one common threat. Though Pakistan is beset with its own issues on the eastern frontier in the shape of an implacable foe and its aggression from the India and a destabilized Afghanistan. But Pakistan has a very strong armed forces and paramilitary component which can hold its own against both these threats. And then Pakistan has other strategic allies like China to take care of that. So this Pakistan definitely is not looking for a material troop concentration or other support, but since the economic muscle plays a very important role in modern warfare, all these platforms are very expensive. Warfare is all about electronics, AI, unmanned aerial weapon systems. So whole nature of warfare is changing. The platforms are becoming very, very expensive. So economic injections and support is very essential. So if that comes to Pakistan from any of these allies, I think that will come in more handy than actual participation in those contingencies, which Pakistan is not looking at. So same is the case with Turkey. Pakistan does not expect to participate in any contingency that Turkey, and I am sure Turkey has no such expectations also. But where they do expect is that Pakistan leverages its battle-tested military's capacity to train, to provide the kind of continual defense industrial-based support because Pakistan has access to Chinese and the Turkish have access to Europeans. So that could be a good combination. So I think that should be synergy that we are all looking at. And of course, this threat menu business, this has to be worked out. And other than that, there are so many other aspects like its command structure. Would there be a secretariat which would take care of their common contingency planning? Would there be a command structure, or would it be kept as a force in being? Would it be a logistic infrastructure that would be based on one or the other country, or there would be small bases on each country? Then what would be the interoperability part? Because the equipment is diverse. Pakistan has Chinese equipment, Turkey has the European and American components, so is Saudi Arabia. So how would these all gel? The common data links, the common data source code. So all those things, these complementarities and synergies have to be kept in mind, and these would be the definitely points for discussion for as the things proceed, and that will take time, but all these aspects are worthy of consideration. Uh, I think this the likelihood of Iran's attack is very less. Proxies, yes, and proxies can act standalone as those are acting in Yemen. There are so many variants of Houthi militants which are some are operating on their own, of their own volition, not having any links with Iran as such. And there is an internecine conflict. There's a STC government. There's a internationally recognized UN government, and then there is this government in Sana'a. So all these tripartite internecine conflict and various factions and Sarullah, for example, if they open a front against Saudi Arabia, obviously Saudi Arabia will weigh its options, and if it can take on itself, the support would be forthcoming, and all those two allies would be obligated to come to its support. Mode of support is to be, considered in that eventuality. That will be contingency based because uh, Pakistani troops have always been there for training purposes. There has been a contingent in the past which was in readiness mode, and on Najran and southern border of Saudi Arabia with Yemen, the Pakistani troops will underwrite the security as they always Pakistan has held that once Saudi Arabia's territorial integrity and those sacred places is already threatened, but not it will not be a tripwire kind of a thing that border skirmishes would entail ground intervention on part of Pakistan. So not in that, but air defense, yes. Intelligence sharing, yes. Training wise, yes. Maybe logistics, of course. That would be a common burden sharing in case of any emergency. So these aspects, any and counter terrorism, for example, a terrorist entity resorts to an act of terror and against any Saudi facility. So Pakistan would be expected and would be providing some assistance as per the terms of this agreement. The nuclear backstop is not part of this agreement, of course, because the focus is all on conventional deterrence. And even during this conflict, the nuclear element did not appear. Iran conflict, America has been bombing and Iran has been responding, but that aspect has not played out. But the mere fact that Pakistan is a nuclear capable country, is part of this alliance, would give a certain kind of degree of seriousness to that alliance. So, as I used the word gravitas to that, and the countries which are involved into this conflict equation would be mindful of that aspect. But or, it's not part of that deal formally. Indians are naturally quite livid. They are quite concerned, and they consider this alliance as another. They always treat Pakistan's alliances with any global power or regional power as a threat to India. But Pakistan has made this thing very clear to India that it has no offensive designs. You consider Operation Sindoor and Marka-e-Haq response from Pakistan. Who was the aggressor? Did Pakistan cross the Rubicon or India? Since Balakot, Sindhu, there is a pattern. So India should not actually be concerned because India itself has a very diverse and very strong defense relationship with Israel, with Russia, with even United States. So, and it has a very strong indigenous defense industrial base. So why should it be concerned? It is just worried because of its policies of the present government, which holds a very exclusivist worldview and which tends to isolate Pakistan. If it wishes to smoke the peace pipe, Pakistan is quite forthcoming. And these demons are of India's own creation. I don't think so. This trilateral alliance poses a existential threat to India. I think Iran has responded quite maturely because definitely the pact is not aimed at Iran. It is it is defensive in nature. Whosoever attacks Saudi Arabia, that or Turkey or Pakistan would be the concern of this pact. And Iran doesn't figure in that. The recent rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, Pakistan is a very close ally and a mediator. Turkey has very good relations with Iran. So where is the danger? The Iranians, yes, their militarized outlook on the security matters in the Gulf. Some factions within Iran, within IRGC, might be thinking that way, but I don't think so. That's the overall policy of the country. And if we see in the long run, in future, just like we had a GCC peninsular shield and a defense framework, uh, several other countries could be co-opted as observer, member, or quasi-members of this pact. Amongst the GCC, Iran might form part in future once the whole situation diffuses and a stable peace exists. The trouble is that one of the catalysts of this pact was the negative peace in Middle East, which was being supported by Israel because Israel doesn't want a concept of a positive peace where the causes are removed. If the causes of the conflict are removed, then several other countries might join this thing because that would be a win-win formulation for all. The military capabilities of the Muslim countries coming together for the common benefit and the regional stability and security. Well, it's not for regional instability. It doesn't export instability since it doesn't threaten anyone. So the countries which are viewing this, including Iran, I think must be weighing their options, must be analyzing this very carefully. There was already a talk of a Middle East Muslim Quad, which included Egypt. And if Egypt in future comes into this arrangement like Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, I think this will be for the good of the region. And Egypt already has settled issues with Israel because unlike other countries like Jordan, Syria, uh, Iraq, Egypt after Camp David has settled its border territorial issues and it has no uh, problems with Israel. And if it becomes part, this will lend added stability to this military alliance. And but whether it happens or not, that's a moot point. In future, if Egypt sees the value, because at the end of the day, it's what value you bring to the table. So all these countries have their own objectives, and but it would not be a very destabilizing factor if Egypt becomes part, or nobody would feel threatened. Rather, Israel might feel more reassured because Egypt has all issues settled with Israel.